Hello? Welcome to anatomy and physiology, of course. The only way I know to do this is to go ahead and continue with the study guides, okay? Whatever that we cover today, there'll be 2 series today because I can't get it all in one today, all in one in this first section. But there'll be probably 2 lectures today, 2 short lectures today, and then that'll be at the beginning of chapter 19. You fill out from the first objective through what we cover today, and that'll be the quiz 5 or 6, whatever the number that it is, okay? And you email that back to me or do something with it, and I'll count that as a quiz. It's the only thing I know to do. Okay, so I think that we finished up with 2 rule outs for an increase and decrease packed cell volume. I want to go back and pick it up with that just because I think that's where that we left off, okay? And we may have done more than that, but hell, I've eaten and slept since then, so. Oh, you can see I got my little shoulder patch on right here, little sling. Sleep in it sometimes. I did not last night, and it hurts a little bit, so no pain pills today, not yet. Hope to make it without it. Anyway, I can picture each one of you right now. And that's what I'm doing. I'm looking at where you sit, and I picture each one of you right now. And I miss you, all right? But we got to do something and call it a course, okay? You got too much invested in this to give up right now. Increase and rule outs, increase and decrease packed cell volume are hematocrit. PCV is the hematocrit. Oh yeah. Now, if you were here the other day, whenever the hell it was the last time I met, Thursday, you already have this right here, okay? But just humor me right here. We want to take a blood sample, right? Put it in a little tube and spin it down. This will be my total volume right here. We would find that about half the cells, half the makeup of this thing is cells, and the other half is fluid. So my cells will pack in the volume. That's how come it gets the term packed cell volume. And the vast majority of these cells are red blood cells. 99.99%, somewhere in there, are the red blood cells. White blood cells make up a small fraction right there, and platelets or fragments make up even a smaller section of it. So we're going to be looking at plasma, fluid, mainly water, and cells. This is a normal packed cell volume. Let's say it's around 50%. And I won't miss it very far. Maybe 53 for guys, maybe 48 for women, somewhere in there. So let's say a normal right here, PCV, somewhere normal around 50. Now let's take a look at an increased packed cell volume. An increased packed cell volume. That's our total volume. Now for some reason I got more cells than normal. So I have an increased PCV. The numbers aren't important. The fact that it's increased is. So let's make this an increased packed cell volume. All right? 2 possible causes. I've only got 2 things to look at. I've got the amount of fluid, the volume of the fluid, and the number of cells. That's all the hell I need to concern myself with. Nothing else right here. So if I want to concern myself with the fluid right here, what is the fluid level compared to normal? Is it higher than normal, or less than normal? Well, if my cell volume has gone up, my fluid volume has gone down. The most common cause for a decreased fluid volume is dehydration. So the most common cause for an increased packed cell volume is dehydration. Increased packed cell volume, dehydration. Now, let's say I'm not dehydrated though. Then I got to focus on the cells. What is causing the number of cells to increase? What is causing specifically the numbers of red blood cells to increase right here? Now this could be due to several things right here. And you think of the hormone that influences the bone marrow to produce the red blood cells, and that is erythropoietin. Think of where the erythropoietin comes from. That's going to be the kidney. A kidney tumor would increase the concentration of EPO, which would overstimulate the bone marrow to produce the red blood cells right here. So a kidney tumor would be a possible rule out for an increased packed cell volume, okay? Kidney tumor. Now let's take a look at a decreased packed cell volume. Decreased packed cell volume, all right? So, again, I'm only going to look at my fluid, I'm only going to look at my cells right here. Fluid level this time, in this case, is more so than normal. So if dehydration decreases it, well then overhydration is a simple cause. I just drank a lot of fluid, okay? Maybe I got dehydrated, maybe I just got thirsty, maybe I exercised or something, I drank a lot of fluid, went and had my blood level checked right here, and lo and behold, my packed cell volume has gone down. Well, don't freak out yet. It may simply be because of or due to overhydration. Overhydration. Now, let's say that my fluid volume is normal, but my cell volume is low. Alrighty? So what would cause a decreased packed cell volume? In more particular, what would decrease the numbers of red blood cells that we have right here? Okay? Now, maybe I got a bone marrow problem. Okay, maybe I got a problem with my bone marrow. Maybe I have an anemia, an aplastic anemia, where I'm not producing the red blood cells. So bone marrow problem. That's all I'm going to put down up here is a bone marrow problem. Something is wrong with my bone marrow. Or maybe I'm not having enough erythropoietin. I could go back to that one right there. So I'll take either one. Decrease the erythropoietin or a bone marrow problem for a possible cause for a decreased packed cell volume. Okay. Bone marrow problem. Or decrease erythropoietin. It's that simple. Okay, now, the biconcave disc of erythrocyte looks like a donut with a hole in it. That's what a red blood cell looks like. Now, the hole isn't quite a hole. It's a very thin layer of tissue right there. But you got a picture of this sucker in here. My 644, you're probably 664, somewhere in there. You got a picture of it right here. Now, there are several reasons for this. One of them is that it allows the formation of the red blood cells to stack, called a rouleau formation, R-U-L-E-O-U-X, rouleau formation. Then I want you to get me two more out of the text, okay? So, looking at this next objective right here, and I'll erase this one right here. Three advantages of the biconcave disc. One is it allows the red blood cells to stack, rouleau formation. And I just screw the spelling up right here. Looking at R-O-U-L-E-A-U-X. R-O-U-L-E-A-U-X. That's the stacking of the red blood cells so they can get through the capillaries. That's the benefit of having rouleau formations, stacking the red blood cells so they can get through the capillaries. So the capillaries aren't very big, aren't much bigger than what the red blood cells are anyway. They really aren't. So when these suckers stack, it allows them to go through the capillaries easier. Give me two other reasons from your text, and that'll be fine with me. Okay? Now, the makeup and function of hemoglobin. That's what I want to take a look at right now. Hemoglobin itself. Look, the globin is a protein structure. There's two alpha chains and two beta chains in each hemoglobin unit, in each hemoglobin molecule, right? Two alphas and two betas. Right? So the globin structure is just a protein. It's all that it is. The heme is made up of iron and a porphyrin ring. Made up of iron, heme, iron, and porphyrin ring. P-O-R-Y-P-H-R-Y-N. Porphyrin ring. Right, that's the makeup of hemoglobin. Globin is a protein. There's two alphas and two beta chains that make that up. The heme is made up of iron and made up of the porphyrin ring structure itself. Now it's interesting that the structure of iron in hemoglobin is a +2. Don't write this down. I'm not looking for this right here. It has a valence of +2. Okay? Now you can oxidize this and have an iron +3, which does not carry oxygen at all. The function of the heme, the function of the iron in hemoglobin, is to bind to molecular oxygen. But it's the Fe+2 that binds to the molecular oxygen. If it's oxidized to Fe+3, we're dead. Because it will not transport, it will not bind to oxygen in the blood at all. Then the tissues are going to starve, okay? Starve for oxygen, okay? Now, the difference between fetal hemoglobin and adult hemoglobin is, well, the difference is in the globin structure right there, okay? There's a gamma structure. I think it's an alpha and a gamma, but I don't really care about that, okay? Because I had to go back and review it to begin with. But I know there's a difference in the globin structure. The difference in the globin structure allows for the position of the iron to change. There's a higher binding affinity of the iron in the fetal hemoglobin than the maternal hemoglobin. I'm going to say that again. There's a higher binding affinity of the iron in the fetal hemoglobin for the oxygen versus that of the maternal, of the mother's hemoglobin. So when the mother's hemoglobin passes through the placenta, the oxygen can be robbed from her hemoglobin and transferred to the fetal hemoglobin. That's a darn good thing. Otherwise, if it weren't so, none of us would be here. The fetus would be starved of oxygen. Okay? So that's the difference between fetal hemoglobin and maternal hemoglobin. Okay? Now, what is unusual about the binding affinity of oxygen to hemoglobin? Okay? Let me show you this right here. Okay, I don't remember the page number. I looked for it when you didn't see it. But let me show you this right here. This is tissues. This is a capillary. Capillary could be linear, it doesn't really matter, or circular, it doesn't really matter. There's a capillary and there's the tissue cells that we have right here. Well, the binding affinity for hemoglobin to oxygen has to change. It has to be weak at one point and stronger at another point, okay? If the binding affinity never changed, then when oxygen associated with the iron in the hemoglobin, it would never release it. It would be whatever that it is. If it picked it up, it would hang on to it. If it never picked it up, it would never carry it. So the binding affinity has to be different in circulation between iron and oxygen. Now, what we have right here is when the tissue pH is fairly low, the binding affinity is going to be lower. So what I have right here is the binding affinity of hemoglobin changes in the tissues, okay? It also changes in the lungs, all right? So the binding affinity is going to change in the tissues where we have low pH. Let's see. Lower pH due to anaerobic respiration right there, due to the buildup of lactic acid right there, is going to lower the pH in the tissues right there. So when the oxygen that's bound to the iron approaches the tissues that have a lower pH, the binding affinity of oxygen and iron changes. So the lower pH reduces the binding affinity of oxygen to iron and releases the oxygen. That's what I want you to get out of this right here. And I'll show you this again. The tissues are going to have a low pH right here due to aerobic respiration, or anaerobic respiration, because of the buildup of lactic acid. This binding affinity is going to change when it is associated with, when it comes in contact with this lower tissue pH. The tissue pH changes the binding affinity, weakens the binding affinity between oxygen and the hemoglobin, and releases the oxygen. That's what I want you to get out of it. All right? Take a look in your text and straighten yourself out on this right here. Okay? I got a few definitions already. Anemia, just decreased oxygen in the blood. You can look this up right here. Hemolyzed, hemoglobinuria, hematuria. I think you can get that out of the text right there. I have decreased blood flow. It's ischemia. I don't have that word in there. I want to add that word. Ischemia, I-S-C-H-E-M-I-A. Is decreased blood flow to the tissues. Decreased blood flow to the tissues, as we have right here. Hypoxia is decreased oxygen to the tissues. Hypoxia is decreased oxygen to the tissues. All right? But there's a difference between decreased blood flow and decreased oxygen. Okay? So there's a difference in these two words. And anemia is just decreased oxygen in the blood, period. Okay? So I'd like for you to know the difference between these. So when you write this stuff out, add these words right here. Add anemia, add ischemia, and add hypoxia to the list, if you would please. Okay? Now, the recycling of heme will probably be all that I'll talk about right here. And I'll take a small break, probably go to lunch. And when I finish after lunch, that'll be the end of this quiz, 5 or 6, whatever that it is, okay? Now, the recycling of heme. My page number is 647. Yours is probably 667, somewhere in there, okay? Mine is figure 19-5, all right? So when you get a chance, take a look at 19-5. All you got to do is look at this picture right here. Now what you're going to see is that we have a hellacious recycling scheme, recycling setup to recycle the iron itself. We conserve about 98% of the iron that's in our hemoglobin. So let's take a look at the lysing of the red blood cell to begin with, the release of the cellular contents, the release of the hemoglobin, and see what happens to it right here. So we're going to start off in an organ that has some phagocytic cells, maybe the liver, maybe the spleen, with these very large phagocytic cells right here. And you can get the names of them right there, the macrophages. And I always think of the liver full of sinusoids. And that's not quite true, but a sinusoid is just a widened venule. So let's picture the hallway right here being part of the circulatory system right there. I'm not going to walk over open the door, but let's open the door right there and let the blood come into this room right here, where the fluid level, where the speed of it slows down. Well, as it slows down, it passes across the macrophages that line the wall. But these macrophages are like 300-pound linebackers. Red blood cells like a 180-pound running back or something right there. So he has to pass through over these macrophages. And due to a shape change in his age, whatever happens to the shape change of the red blood cell makes him look older. About 120 days is about as old as he's going to get. He's going to be phagocytized. And once he's phagocytized, he's going to be broken down. We know the steps in phagocytosis. We know it's going to involve the lysosomes. So it's going to be phagocytized. The red blood cell is going to be lysed. The membrane is going to be destroyed. And the cellular contents are going to be released. And we have hemoglobin being released from the liver and from the spleen. Okay, now let's see what happens to him. If you'll take a look at the top of the chart right here. The iron, I don't care if you tell me it's +2 or +3. That was just an additional part between the transportation of oxygen a minute ago if it's oxidized. The iron is transported in circulation by transferrin. Transferrin is a protein that's going to transfer the iron from the liver to the bone marrow. And it transports about 98% of the iron. So we don't need a whole lot of iron in our diet to replace the iron lost from the recycling of the red blood cell. So the iron is going to be replaced, taken to the bone marrow to make more new red blood cells. Okay? Now, the globin is made up of a protein, which is made up of amino acids. It's simply going to be recycled. Now, some of this will make it to the bone